The sensor wall of the Imperial flagship Cold Sovereign showed a contact that the laws of the Empire said could not be there, and Fleet Commander Oru Vanek felt the floor of her certainty tilt under her feet. She had ruled this region of the dark for 91 years. She knew every hull that flew in it. She knew the merchant lanes, the patrol rings, the long quiet roads between the border stars. Nothing crossed those roads without her catalog knowing the shape of it first. That was the whole point of the Veil Ascendancy. The Empire did not win by being stronger. It won by being earlier. It saw a thing before the thing saw itself, and by the time the thing arrived, the Empire had already decided what it was allowed to be. But the contact on the wall had no entry. Oru leaned toward the readout. Her second, an officer named Sail Koran, stood very still beside her, and she could hear him not breathing. "Run it again," she said. "I have run it 4 times, Commander. Run it a 5th. The wall blinked. The contact stayed. A single hull, gray, moving at a steady speed down a road that no one used because it led nowhere the Empire cared about. It was inside the border. It had crossed the entire outer ring of the Ascendancy without tripping a single watch station, and now it was here, 3 days out from the Imperial core, sliding through the dark like it had every right. "It has no transponder," Ciel said. "No registry echo, no origin tag. It answers nothing." "Then, it is a ghost in the machine," Oru said. "A reflection. Clean it." "Commander," Ciel's voice went thin. "The reflection has mass. 11 million tons of it." The bridge of the Cold Sovereign was a long oval of pale light, and 40 officers worked along its rim, and one by one, Oru watched them stop working. They were looking at the same wall. They were doing the same arithmetic. A hull of 11 million tons did not appear inside the inner border. It could not. The Empire was a closed catalog. There were no blank pages in it. There never had been. And yet the page was blank, and a thing with mass was writing itself onto it. "Wake the hand," Oru said. "All of it." Sail turned to her. "All 12? "All 12. The hand of the Ascendancy was the closest thing the galaxy had to a settled fact. 12 battlespheres, each one a moon hollowed and skinned in black armor, each one carrying 6,000 lances of folded light. They did not patrol. They waited. They were the answer the Empire kept in its pocket for the day a fact tried to change. In 91 years, Oru had woken them only once, and that once had ended a rebellion of 40 worlds in a single afternoon. She woke them now for one gray hull. It took the hand 9 minutes to come alive. While they did, Oru studied the stranger. It did not hurry. It did not hide. It held its course. Dead steady, dead silent. And that silence was the thing that began to crawl under her skin. A raider hid. A rival announced. A coward begged. This did none of those. It simply came, as if the bristling sphere of her empire were a kind of weather it intended to walk through. "Hail it," she said. "On every band, Commander." No reply. "Scan it. I want a class. I want a flag. I want to know whose grave we are about to dig." The scan went out. A wide gray pulse of Imperial light, the same pulse that had measured 10,000 hulls and never once come back confused. It came back confused. Sel read the return twice before he spoke, and when he spoke, his voice had lost its officer's flatness and gone somewhere younger. "The scan says the hull is not new," he said. "It says the hull is not old. It says the metal in it has a date the instrument refuses to print, because the date is on the wrong side of a line our instruments are not built to cross." "Plain words, officer." "The ship is reading as older than the region it is standing in." He swallowed. "The dark out there is roughly 12 billion years along. The ship is reading older than that. By a margin the scanner calls an error, because the alternative is that we are looking at something that was already moving before this part of the sky finished being made." Nobody on the bridge said anything. Oru had spent 91 years teaching herself never to let a room see her flinch. She did not flinch now, but she felt the old certainty go on tilting, and she put both hands flat on the rail to keep the world level. "It is a trick," she said. "A false age, a masking field. We have seen masking fields." "We have," Sail agreed, too quickly, because he wanted it to be true as much as she did. "We have seen masking fields. On the wall, 3 small marks appeared at the front of the gray hull. They had been there the whole time. The scan had only now resolved them. 3 shapes, raised in metal, plain and square and deliberate, set where a flag would go on an imperial ship. The marks were letters. They were not in any imperial script. They were not in any script the catalog carried. But Oru did not need the catalog to feel the weight of them, because the hull had been built to carry them, and a builder did not put 3 marks on the prow of an 11-million-ton ship unless the marks were the most important thing it owned. "Translate them," she said. "The catalog has no entry, Commander. It has entries for 9,000 languages. It has no entry for these." Oru looked a long time at the 3 marks. She did not know it yet, but every officer who would ever serve the Veil Ascendancy was going to learn those 3 marks before they learned their own rank. And they would learn them the way one learns the shape of the thing that ended everything they had been promised was safe. The marks read, ERT. The rest of the word had not yet turned into the light. The hull was still angling. When it finished its turn, the 4th mark would come around, and the word would be whole, and it would be a name, and the name would be the first true thing the Empire had failed to catalog in 91 years. "Commander," Sale said quietly, "the hand is awake." "Then put it between us and that," Oru said. "All 12 spheres, a wall. Nothing this gray ghost can be was made to pass a wall of the hand." She believed that. She had to believe that. The whole architecture of her life rested on the wall of the hand being the last word in any argument. She gave the order. 12 hollow moons turned in the dark and began to move, 6,000 lances apiece coming up to a low red readiness, and the Empire arranged its certainty across the road like a fist closing on a single gray traveler. The gray traveler did not change course. It did not change speed. It came on toward the closing fist exactly as it had come on toward everything else, and somewhere on the bridge of the Cold Sovereign, a young officer made a small sound, because the stranger was not behaving like a thing that had seen a wall. It was behaving like a thing that had walked through a great many of them. The 4th mark turned into the light, and the word on the prow was whole, and it read, Earth. Sel spoke it aloud, his throat shaping a sound it had never made. Earth. He looked at Oru. "It is a place name, Commander. A world. The ship is named for its home." "Then the home is in the catalog," Oru said. "Find it. Every ship is from somewhere, and every somewhere is on a page." The search ran. The whole catalog of the Veil Ascendancy turned over. 9,000 languages, 400,000 named worlds. Every star the Empire had ever charted, measured, taxed, or burned. It searched for a world called Earth. It found nothing. "There is no such world," Sel said. "Not in the living record, not in the dead record, not in the lost record. The Empire has never met a world called Earth, has never traded with one, has never conquered one, has never heard the word." "Impossible," Oru said. "A hull of this size needs a yard. A yard needs a world. A world this advanced leaves a wake across 1,000 lanes. You do not build an 11-million-ton ship in secret." "Unless," said a third voice. It came from the deep end of the bridge, from a station that was rarely manned, where the Empire kept its single oldest officer. His name was Veth Maro, and he was 240 years old, kept alive past the ordinary span, because the Ascendancy did not like to lose a memory it had paid so much to grow. He had read the catalog more times than anyone living. He had read the parts of it that were sealed. "Unless what, Archivist?" Oru said. "Unless the yard is not missing from the record," Veth Maro said. He rose slowly. "Unless the yard was removed from the record. There is a difference, Commander, and the difference is the whole of it. A thing the Empire never knew leaves a blank page. A thing the Empire knew and chose to erase leaves a page that has been cut out, and the cut leaves an edge." He came forward into the light, and the younger officers drew back a little, the way the young always draw back from the very old, when the very old begin to speak of things older than the young can stand. "There is an edge," he said, "in the sealed catalog. I have seen it. A region of the record where the page numbers skip, 11 of them, gone. For 2 centuries I told myself it was damage, rot, a scribe's error." He looked at the gray hull on the wall. "I do not think it was an error any longer. I think someone in this Empire, a very long time ago, met a world they could not catalog, and rather than write it down, they cut it out, and then they cut out the cut, so that even the wound would not show. And I think the world they cut out is named on the prow of that ship. Oru stared at him. You are telling me the Empire erased a world from its own memory. I am telling you the Empire may have erased a world from the sky, Vethmaro said, and the Sky Commander, in my long experience, does not always agree to forget. On the wall, the gray hull crossed a line of mathematics, and the hand of the Ascendancy met it. The first sphere fired. 6,000 lances of folded light, each one able to open a battleship like a seed, all of them at once. A single sheet of killing brightness wide enough to swallow a city. It struck the gray hull dead on. The hull did not stop. The hull did not slow. The hull did not even brighten where the light landed, and that was the wrong thing. That was the deeply wrong thing, because armor that takes a lance glows. Armor that takes a lance screams in the heat bands. Armor that takes a lance dies a little even when it holds. This armor did none of that. The light from 6,000 lances arrived at the gray hull and simply ended, the way a shout ends at a wall, going nowhere, becoming nothing, as if the ship had decided the energy was not a thing that was happening to it. Status, Oru said. No damage, Sail said. Commander, there is no damage. Not scored, not warmed. The sensors say the hull did not register the impact as an event. That is not possible. I am reading you what is on the wall. The second sphere fired, then the third. Then all 12, in a rolling wall of light that turned that whole stretch of dark white, 6,000 lances times 12, 72,000 strikes, the single most concentrated act of violence the Veil Ascendancy had performed in 40 years, all of it aimed at one gray traveler the size of a city. When the light cleared, the traveler was still coming. Oru Vanek had given that order with the full weight of 91 years behind it, and she watched it fail. And she understood in that moment that she was no longer standing in the empire she had been born into. She was standing somewhere new, somewhere the catalog did not reach, and the floor under her was the floor of a story that had been written long before she was born and had only now turned its face toward her. It is answering, Sel said suddenly. The gray hull spoke, not in any imperial band. It spoke in a band the Empire did not use, a low patient carrier that the cold sovereign only caught because it was listening on everything at once. And it did not speak in threat, it spoke in question, and the question was the most frightening sound Oru had ever heard, because it was gentle. The translators chewed on it for 9 seconds, then they printed it, and the words went up on the wall in imperial script, and the bridge of the cold sovereign went so silent that Oru could hear the cooling fans turning in the deck below her feet. The gray hull had said, "We are looking for Earth. We have been looking for a long time. Can you help us?" It does not know. Vethmaro breathed. Commander, it does not know what happened to its own home. It is asking us. It has come all this way to ask the Empire, because the Empire is the keeper of the catalog, and it is asking us where its world is. Then we tell it nothing, Oru said. We do not have a world called Earth. That is the truth. Send it. Commander. Vethmaro's old voice cracked. If there is a cut in the sealed record, then the Empire did have a world called Earth, and the Empire took it out of the sky, and that ship is the surviving piece of it, and it has spent an age we cannot measure, crossing the dark to come home. If we tell it nothing, we are not refusing a stranger directions. We are the ones who burned its house, and are now claiming we have never seen a fire. Oru looked at him. She looked at the gray hull. She looked at the gentle words on the wall. We have been looking for a long time, and something in her, some last honest thing under the 91 years of catalog and certainty, knew that the old archivist was right. Open the sealed record, she said. Commander, the seal is by imperial law. Only the throne. Open it. I will answer to the throne when the throne explains to me why there is a hole in the sky shaped like a ship I cannot kill. Vethmaro went to the deep station. He laid his old hand on the lock. The cold sovereign, which had been built to remember everything and forgive nothing, opened the part of itself that had been told to forget, and the 11 missing pages began, slowly, to bleed back into the light. They were not blank. That was the first horror. They had been cut, but the cut had not been clean, and along the torn edge of the 11 pages, there were fragments, a sentence here, a number there, the way a burned book keeps words along the spine. The fragment said, "A small blue world." The fragment said, "Third from a yellow star, far down a quiet arm." The fragment said, "A young people, no fleet, no empire, no catalogue of their own, who had asked to join the lanes and been told to wait." The fragment set a date, and the date was 11 billion years in the past, which the Empire's own arithmetic said was impossible, because 11 billion years ago, the lanes did not exist, the Empire did not exist, the very stars of the core had not yet lit. And then the fragments said the thing that broke the room. They said the world had not been conquered, it had not been taxed, it had not even been visited, it had been removed. An early throne of the ascendancy, the very first one, the one whose name was itself sealed, had found a young blue world in a quiet arm, and had decided that a people who built so fast and asked so politely would one day be a rival the catalogue could not contain. And so the first throne had not fought them. The first throne had done the thing the Empire was actually built to do. It had unlisted them. It had reached into the sky with the oldest and worst of the imperial arts, the art the ascendancy had buried so deep that even Veth Maro had thought it a legend, and it had edited the world of Earth out of the record of what was real. Not destroyed, edited. They unmade them from the catalogue, Veth Maro whispered, reading. They did not burn the world, they erased the entry, and the Empire's catalogue is not a list of what is real. Commander, do you understand? The catalogue is what makes a thing real. We rule by being earlier, by deciding what a thing is allowed to be before it arrives. The first throne decided Earth was allowed to be nothing. It struck the page, and the world followed the page out of the sky, and the people followed the world, and the only thing that did not follow was... That, Oru said, staring at the gray hull. That did not follow. That was already out the door, Veth Maro said. A single ship, finished and crewed, and on a maiden run, beyond the edge of its own star, on the day the Empire reached back and unmade its home behind it. The edit closed on the world. The ship was outside the edit. And so the ship is the one thing in all the sky that the catalogue cannot account for, because the catalogue says its makers were never real, and yet here it comes, 11 million tons of a people the Empire swears never existed, asking, politely, where its home has gone. The gray hull spoke again. The translators caught it. "We will wait," it said. "We are patient. We have come far. Please find our world in your book." Oru Vanek stood on the bridge of the most powerful flagship in the inner border, and felt the entire weight of the empire she served settle onto her shoulders, like a guilt she had inherited without knowing. She had not done this thing. She had been born 91 years ago, into an empire that had done it 11 billion years before, and had then made very sure that no one, not even its own commanders, would ever be able to find out. She had spent her whole life as the keeper of a catalogue whose first and deepest entry was a lie of erasure. "It is going to ask the throne next," she said slowly. "When we fail to answer, it is going to keep going. It is 3 days out from the core. It is going to walk into the heart of the empire and ask the throne itself where its world has gone." "Yes," Veth Maro said. "And the throne cannot answer, because the throne is the catalogue, and the catalogue is the thing that did this. The gray hull is not coming to attack the Empire, Archivist. It is coming to file a question the Empire cannot close." She turned to him, and her face had gone the color of old metal. And a question the catalogue cannot close is the one thing the catalogue was never built to survive. The deep station chimed. The sealed record had finished bleeding back, and at the very bottom of the 11 recovered pages, beneath all the fragments, there was one line that the first throne had written, and had clearly believed no one would ever read, because it was written not as law, but as a warning to itself, in the private hand of a ruler talking to the dark. Veth Maro read it aloud, and his old voice shook on every word. "It says," he said, "it says, if the ship ever returns, do not fight it. We cannot win. We did not destroy a people. We told a lie about a people. And a ship built by a people who were real cannot be killed by a lie about whether they existed. It carries the truth in its hull. The truth is the heaviest thing there is. Let it pass. Give it the world back. Beg if you must. For the day the truth arrives is the day the catalog ends, and there is no fleet, no hand, no throne, that can stand between a lie and the truth it was built on top of. Oru looked at the gray hull. 11 million tons of a fact the Empire had spent 11 billion years pretending was a blank page. It had crossed the dark. It had taken the full fire of the hand without warming. It was asking, gently, to come home. "Stand the hand down," she said. Cell turned. "Commander, the law. Stand it down. We are not going to kill it. We cannot kill it. The First Throne already told us so, 11 billion years ago, and the First Throne was the only one of us who ever saw the whole shape of this." She drew a breath that hurt. We are going to do the other thing. We are going to find out whether an empire built on an erased world can do the one thing it has never done in its entire history." "Which is, Commander?" "Tell the truth," Oru Vanek said, "before that ship reaches the throne and makes the truth tell itself." On the wall, the gray hull came on, steady and patient and gray, the word Earth plain on its prow, and behind it, all 12 spheres of the Hand of the Ascendancy lowered their lances and got out of the way, because their commander had finally read far enough back into her own empire to understand that some hulls are not enemies arriving. Some hulls are bills coming due. Before the throne answered, the empire argued with itself, and Oru Vanek listened to it tear. The sealed line she had used to send the truth upward was not as sealed as the law pretended. The Veil Ascendancy was old, and old things leak. By the time her message reached the Imperial core, copies of it had already slipped sideways into the patrol rings, into the watch stations, into the long, quiet wards of the border, and the truth she had spoken to the throne began, quietly, to be read by officers who had never been meant to read it. A fleet commander had opened the sealed record. A fleet commander had named a world the catalog swore had never existed. A fleet commander had said the word Earth on an Imperial channel. Within the hour, the border was at war with its own memory. There was an admiral named Tessin Hale who commanded the 3rd Patrol Ring, a hard old officer who had served the catalog longer than Oru had been alive, and he was the first to break the silence, and he broke it against her. His message came in cold and flat and certain. The gray hull was a weapon, he said. The sealed record was a forgery, planted by a clever enemy to turn the Empire's own officers against the throne. Commander Vanek had been deceived, or worse, suborned, and any officer who repeated her lie would answer for it. The catalog was the floor of the world. There was no world called Earth. There had never been a world called Earth. He had served the Empire for 140 years, and he would not watch it talk itself into believing it was a murderer on the word of a ghost. Oru read his message twice. She did not feel anger. She felt something more like grief, because she recognized him. He was what she had been 3 days before. He was a good officer standing on a lie, certain the lie was the floor, and she knew there was nothing she could say to argue him off it, because she had not been argued off it herself. She had been shown the cut in the record, and she had read it, and the reading had done what no argument could. So she did not argue. She did the one thing the Empire had never done. She sent Admiral Tessin Hale the record. All 11 pages. The cut and the cut of the cut. The fragments along the torn edge. The First Throne's private warning in his own hand. The line that said, "Do not fight it. We cannot win." She sent it to him raw, unsealed, with no commentary, because she had learned that the truth did not need to be argued. It only needed to be allowed to arrive. For a long time, the 3rd ring was silent. Then Admiral Tessin Hale's voice came back, and it had changed, and Oru heard in it the same thing she had felt break in her own chest 3 days before, the floor going out from under 140 years. "I have read it," he said. His flat, hard voice had gone old and uncertain. "Commander, I have served the catalog my whole life. I taught it to 1,000 officers. I told them it was the floor of the world." A long pause. "There is a cut in the floor. I can see the edge of it. I have been standing on a hole and calling it ground." Another pause. Longer. "The First Throne's hand is genuine. I know it. I have read his other seals 100 times. He wrote, 'Do not fight it. We cannot win, and we are fighting it.'" His voice cracked, an old man's voice, suddenly. "What have we been protecting, Commander? What have I spent 140 years defending?" "A blank page," Oru said gently. Where a world used to be. None of us did it, Admiral. We only kept it blank. And keeping it blank turns out to be the same crime, told slower. The throne will call you a traitor. The throne is the part of the empire that did this, Oru said. I am the part of the empire that is going to undo it. If that makes me a traitor, then the empire needs more traitors, and it needs them quickly, because that gray ship is 2 days from the core, and it is asking, gently, where its home has gone, and the throne is going to lie to it again, and the first throne told us in his own hand what happens when we do. Admiral Tessin Hale was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, the uncertainty had burned off, and what was left underneath it was harder than anything the catalog had ever put there. The third ring is 40,000 hulls, he said. They are loyal to me before they are loyal to the throne. I have made very sure of that for 140 years, and I never knew why until now. She heard the decision settle into his voice like a weight finding its place. When the throne calls you a traitor, Commander Vanek, it is going to find that the third ring has gone deaf. We will not fire on the gray hull, and if the home fleet fires, we will be behind it, and the home fleet will have to decide whether it wants 2 fights instead of 1. A pause. I am too old to learn a new floor, Commander, but I am not too old to stop standing on a hole. Lead on. The third ring is with you. And so the Empire, which had erased a world in cowardice 11 billion years before, began, hull by hull and admiral by admiral, to do the bravest thing a thing built on a lie can do, which is to read the lie and refuse to keep telling it. It did not happen everywhere. There were rings that stayed loyal to the throne, rings that called the record a forgery, rings that would fire when the order came. The Empire did not turn all at once, but it turned in pieces, and the pieces that turned were the ones that had read the record, and that was the lesson, that was the whole lesson, that the only thing that ever moved a true officer off a lie was being shown the truth and being trusted to read it. Oru Vanek gathered the turning pieces to her. The third ring, 40,000 hulls, a scattering of watch stations, whose keepers had read the record and gone deaf to the throne. Officers of the home fleet, who had heard her speak the truth on the open band, and could not unhear it. None of them were enough, alone, to matter against the full weight of the Imperial core. But together, they were a thing the Veil Ascendancy had never had in 11 billion years, which was a part of itself that knew the truth and had chosen it, and that part, small as it was made of the same unmovable stuff as the gray hull, and the throne, when it finally answered, was going to find that it could no longer command the whole of its own empire, because some of the empire had become a fact. The throne did not believe her. Oru Vanek sent the truth up the chain herself, on a sealed line, addressed to the Imperial core, and within the hour, the answer came back down, and the answer was an order, and the order was the same order the first throne had given 11 billion years before, because an empire that erases its own crimes also erases the memory of how badly the crime went, and so it makes the crime again. The order said, destroy the gray hull. The order said, the sealed record is a forgery planted by the stranger to weaken imperial resolve. The order said, there is no world called Earth. There has never been a world called Earth, and any officer who speaks the word again will be struck from the catalog, which in the Veil Ascendancy was not a figure of speech. They are going to do it again, Vethmaro said. He had gone very gray. They do not believe the warning their own first throne left them, because the warning is in the sealed record, and they have spent so long teaching themselves that the sealed record is not real, that they cannot read it as true, even when it is screaming at them. Commander, the Empire is about to lie to a ship that is made of a fact. It will not survive the attempt. How long until the core defenses fire? Oru said. They are firing now. The Imperial core did not wait for the gray hull to arrive. It reached out across 3 days of dark with the longest weapons the Ascendancy owned. The throne lances, the ones that did not bother with light, but folded the space in front of a target until the target was no longer in a place where existing was allowed. These were the weapons that had ended the rebellion of 40 worlds. These were the weapons that, the Empire told itself, made facts. They folded the space around the gray hull. And the gray hull stayed where it was. Oru watched it on the wall, and she finally understood the shape of the thing she was looking at. The reason the first throne had written, do not fight it. We cannot win. The throne lances did not damage the hull, They tried to remove it from the place it was in, the way the first throne had removed the world, and the hull did not allow it, not by fighting back, not by shielding, but simply by being too real for the trick to take. The throne lance was a tool for editing reality. It worked on things whose claim to be real was thin. The gray hull's claim to be real was the heaviest in the sky, because it was the surviving truth of a whole people, carried in metal, 11 billion years old and unbroken, and a tool for unlisting the thin could no more remove it than a breath could move a mountain. The space folded, the space unfolded. The gray hull came on, unmoved, Earth plane on its prow turning slowly to Earth, and the Empire's deepest weapon broke itself against the one thing it had never been built to handle, which was a fact it had told a lie about. The gray hull spoke. It still was not angry. That was the part the bridge crew could not bear. It said, "You are trying to move us. Please do not. We will not move. We have only one question. Where is our world?" Then it added a second line, and the second line was the first time in 11 billion years that anyone had said the true thing aloud inside the borders of the Veil Ascendancy. It said, "We think you know." The whole bridge heard it. 40 officers, every one of them sworn to the catalog, every one of them raised to believe the catalog was the floor of the world, heard a gray stranger say, "We think you know," and 40 officers understood at once that it was true, that the floor had always had a hole in it, that the empire they served had been earlier than the truth, in exactly one place, and had used that earliness to make a people disappear. Oru turned to her crew. She was their commander. She had 91 years of their loyalty. She could feel it on her like a weight, and she made a decision that would cost her everything the catalog could take, which was a great deal, and would give her the one thing the catalog had never offered, which was the truth. "It is right," she said. "We do know. The Empire knew. The first throne did this. The record I opened is real. There was a world called Earth, and we erased it, not in war but in cowardice, because a young people who built fast and asked politely frightened a ruler who could not bear a rival the catalog could not own. And that ship is the child of that world, come home to a house we burned, and it is asking us, gently, where the house has gone." She drew herself up. "The throne has ordered me to lie to it again. I am 91 years in this service, and I have never once disobeyed the throne. I am going to disobey it now, because the first throne, the only one of us who ever understood, left us a warning, and the warning was right. And I will not be the second commander in 11 billion years to learn this lesson the hard way." Sail Corin looked at her, and he was young, and he had believed in the catalog the way the young believe in the things that raised them, and she watched the belief break in his face, and watched something better grow in the broken place. "What do we do, Commander?" he said. "We tell it the truth," Oru said. "All of it. We open the sealed record to the gray hull, the whole 11 pages, the cut and the cut of the cut, every fragment, and we let it read what was done to its world. And then we do the thing the first throne was too proud to do." She turned to Vethmaro. "Can the catalog be made to put a thing back? Not edit it out. Put it back. Relist a world the Empire unlisted 11 billion years ago." The old archivist had gone the color of ash, but his eyes were bright. The art that removes can restore. It was always two doors of the same room. The first throne walked through the first door and sealed the second behind him, so that no one could undo what he had done. But the door is still there, Commander. It is the deepest function of the Imperial core. To relist Earth, you would have to reach the core, take the catalog from the throne, and write a single word back onto a page that has been blank for 11 billion years. The throne will not allow it. The throne will defend the lie with everything it has, because the throne is the lie. The whole hand. The throne lances, the home fleet, every hull in the inner border. To relist Earth, Commander, you would have to fight your way through the entire heart of your own empire, with one flagship, while that gray ship asks its question, and you would have to reach the core before the throne convinces itself the warning is a forgery, one time too many. Oru Vanek looked at the wall, one gray hull, patient, unkillable, made of a truth too heavy to move. Behind it, 3 days back, the Imperial core, bristling with everything the Ascendancy owned, defending an erasure it could no longer even remember making. She was a fleet commander of the Veil Ascendancy. She had spent 91 years on the Empire's side of this story, and she understood, standing there, that the story had never had two sides. It had a lie and a fact, and she had been standing on the lie her whole life, without knowing the fact was even there. "Signal the Grey Hull," she said. "Tell it I am opening the record. Tell it the truth, every word, and tell it the Empire that erased its world is going to give the world back, or end trying." "And the throne, Commander?" CL asked. Oru Vanek, born of the Empire, raised by the Catalog, keeper of the lie for 91 years, turned the cold sovereign toward the Imperial core and put her own flagship between the Grey Hull and everything the Ascendancy would throw to stop it from coming home. "The throne," she said, "is about to learn what the first throne already knew. You cannot fight a fact. You can only get out of its way, or be the thing it goes through. The Empire chose, 11 billion years ago, to be the thing it goes through." She set her jaw. "I am going to try to choose differently. Open the record, open the road, and signal the Grey Hull one more time." "Saying what, Commander?" She looked at the word on the prow. Earth, plain and square, and patient and real. "Saying, we know where your world is. Follow us in. We will write it back into the sky with you watching, or there will be nothing left of the ones who stop us." The Grey Hull received the signal. For a long moment it said nothing. Then it spoke, and for the first time in 11 billion years, the band it spoke on was not a question. It said, "Thank you. We have waited so long. Lead on." And the cold sovereign, flagship of the Empire that had erased Earth, turned its guns outward against its own home, and led the surviving truth of a murdered world straight toward the throat of the throne. The home fleet of the Vale Ascendancy met them at the second day. It was the largest gathering of hulls the Empire had assembled in a century. 200,000 ships, called in from every patrol ring of the inner border, stacked into a sphere of armor and light, between the Grey Hull and the core. The throne had finally understood that the warning in the sealed record was not a forgery, and instead of heeding it, the throne had done the most imperial thing of all. It had decided that if the warning were true, then the warning had to be made false by force, and it had thrown the whole strength of the Empire at the fact, in the hope that enough lances could turn a truth back into a blank page. Oru Vanek watched 200,000 hulls light their weapons, and she felt no fear. She had felt fear 3 days ago, when the contact first appeared. She did not feel it now. She had crossed some line inside herself, and on the far side of it, there was only a kind of cold, clear certainty that she was, for the first time in her life, on the right side of the catalog. "They will fire on us as well," CL said. "We are between the Grey Hull and the fleet. The cold sovereign is in the killing zone." "I know," Oru said. "We cannot survive 200,000 hulls." "We do not have to," Oru said. "We only have to keep the road open long enough. Watch the Grey Hull, officer. Watch what it does, and learn the lesson the Empire was too proud to learn." The home fleet fired. 200,000 hulls, every lance they owned. A sphere of killing light collapsing inward on 2 ships, the Grey Traveler, and the flagship that had turned traitor to lead it. The dark went white, the instruments on the cold sovereign blinded and reset. For 3 full seconds, there was nothing on the wall but glare. And then the glare cleared, and the Grey Hull was still there, and it had not raised a single weapon, and it had not taken a single mark. Oru finally saw the whole of it. The Grey Hull did not fight. In 2 days she had never once seen it fire, and she understood now that it could not be made to fire, because it was not a warship in the way the Empire understood warships. It was a witness. Its hull was not armor in the sense of metal thick enough to stop a lance. Its hull was the preserved truth of a people, and a truth does not stop a lance the way a wall stops a stone. A truth simply refuses to be the thing the lance is trying to make it. The lance arrived saying you are not real, and the hull answered, without heat, without anger, with the full unbreakable weight of 11 billion years, we were always real, and the lance, being a lie about reality, had nothing to grip, and slid off into the dark and died. 200,000 hulls fired, and fired, and fired, and the Grey Traveler came on, and the only thing the Empire's fire touched was the Empire itself, because a sphere of 200,000 ships all firing inward eventually fires on its own far side, and the home fleet began, slowly, to wound itself on its own light. But the Cold Sovereign was not made of the truth. The Cold Sovereign was an Imperial flagship, the same metal as the fleet that was firing at it, and the first salvo that reached it did exactly what a salvo does to an Imperial flagship. It opened the outer decks like a seed. 40 officers died in the first 3 seconds. The bridge held, because the bridge was the deepest armored place on the ship, but the wall flickered and half the stations went dark, and Oru felt the whole great hull lurch under her like a wounded animal. "We are losing the road," Sel said, his voice tight with blood. "Commander, we cannot hold this. We are not the gray hull. We burn." Oru looked at the gray traveler, untouched, patient, coming on. She looked at the failing decks of her own ship, and she made the calculation that the First Throne had never been brave enough to make, because the First Throne had loved the Empire more than the truth, and Oru Vanek had just discovered, at 91 years of age, that she did not. "Then we stop being the road," she said, "and we become the question." She opened a band to the gray hull, the patient low carrier it had spoken on, and she did the thing no commander of the Vale Ascendancy had ever done. She told a stranger the Empire's deepest secret, freely, on an open channel, where the whole home fleet could hear it. "This is Fleet Commander Oru Vanek, of the Imperial flagship Cold Sovereign," she said, and her voice went out across 2 days of dark, into every hull of the home fleet, into the core, up to the throne itself. "I have read the sealed record. 11 billion years ago, the first throne of this empire found a young blue world called Earth, third from a yellow star and a quiet arm, a people who built fast and asked politely. The first throne was afraid of them, so the first throne did not conquer them. It erased them. It reached into the catalog and struck their entry, and the world followed the entry out of the sky, and a whole people died not in fire but in a lie, and the Empire has spent 11 billion years making very sure that not one of us would ever be able to find out. The gray ship coming through your fire is the one survivor of that world. It was outside the edit, when the edit closed. It has crossed the whole age of the dark to come home, and ask us, gently, where its world has gone." The home fleet's fire faltered. It did not stop. But across 200,000 hulls, in 100,000 bridges, gunners heard a fleet commander say a whole people died in a lie, and felt their hands slow on the lances, because the Empire had raised them to believe the catalog was the floor of the world, and now the keeper of a flagship was telling them the floor had a body buried under it. "You are firing," Oru said, "to keep a blank page blank. That is what your lances do. They are not defending the Empire. They are defending an erasure. And the First Throne, the only one of us who ever saw the whole of it, left a warning in the sealed record, in his own hand, and the warning says, 'Do not fight it. We cannot win. A ship built by a people who were real cannot be killed by a lie about whether they existed.' He was right. Look at your own fire. Look at where it lands. You cannot touch it. You can only touch each other." Her voice cracked, and she let it. "I am 91 years in this service. I have never disobeyed the throne. I am disobeying it now, and I am asking every one of you to do the same, because the thing you are protecting is the worst thing this empire ever did, and the thing coming through your guns is the only chance any of us will ever have to be on the right side of it." The gray hull spoke then, on the same open band, so the whole fleet heard it, and it did not threaten, and it did not accuse, and that was what undid the last of them. It said, "We hold nothing against you. We know you did not do this. It was done before any of you were born. We do not want your empire. We do not want your worlds. We want one thing. We want our home put back into the sky. Help us, and we will go, and you will never see us again, except as a world that is there when it should always have been." The home fleet stopped firing. It stopped in a way Oru Vanek had not expected, and would never forget. The last hull to lower its lances was a small patrol cutter at the far edge of the sphere, an old ship with an old crew, the kind of vessel that never made the histories, and its captain sent one short message on the open band before the lances went dark, and the message was not to the throne, and not to Oru, and not to the gray hull. It was to no one. It was a thing a person says when the floor they have stood on their whole life finally gives way, and they find, to their surprise, that there is something solid underneath after all. "My grandmother served the catalog," the old captain said. "My grandmother's grandmother served the catalog. We were told it was the floor of the world. We were told there were no blank pages. A pause, and the whole stilled fleet heard it, because the whole stilled fleet was holding its breath. There was one. There was a world under the floor. I am 80 years in this service, and I never once looked down. The lances on the small cutter went dark. I am looking down now. There is a world there. I will not fire on the ship that is bringing it home. And the gray hull, which heard everything and forgot nothing, answered the old captain on the same band, gently, as it answered everything. It said, "Thank you for looking down. Most never do. It is the hardest thing there is, to look under the floor you were raised on. You did it at 80 years. Our people waited 11 billion. We know what it costs to look. We will not forget that you paid it." Oru Vanek stood on her burning bridge and watched 200,000 hulls choose, one by one, to look down, and she understood that this was the real victory, the one that mattered more than the core, more than the door, more than the world. The gray hull could have reached the core alone. It could not be stopped. It did not need the Empire's help to come home, but it had given the Empire something the Empire could never have given itself, which was the chance to look down, to read the record, to hold a name aloud in the dark, to choose the truth over the order, and in choosing it to become, hull by hull and crew by crew, something the Veil Ascendancy had not been in 11 billion years, which was honest. The home fleet did not part for the gray hull because it was beaten. It parted because it had read the record and could not, would not, fire on a fact. And that, Oru thought, watching the lances go dark across the great sphere, was the only kind of victory that ever held. A fleet forced aside came back. A fleet that chose to stand aside never raised its guns again. The road to the core lay open, the lances going dark across the great sphere, as gunner after gunner made the same choice Oru had made, lined now on both sides by an empire that had chosen to look down. Down the middle of it came the gray traveler, untouched, patient, earth plane on its prow, with a turned admiral behind it, and a repaired guard behind that, and a small old cutter at the far edge, whose captain had, at 80 years of age, finally looked under the floor of the world, and found a world there. Behind the gray hull came the wounded, cold sovereign, burning along 3 decks, holding together by the will of a commander who had finally found something worth burning for. The road had been opened not by guns, but by the truth, spoken aloud by the one officer in 11 billion years who had read far enough back to find it, and had been brave enough to say it where everyone could hear. There was one part of the Empire that did not turn. The throne kept a guard of its own, separate from the home fleet, separate from the rings, 100 hulls of black metal that answered to nothing but the core and had never once in 11 billion years been given an order they refused. They were called the Stillward, and they did not read records, and they did not argue, and they did not feel the floor go out from under them, because they had been built without a floor to lose. The throne sent them now, the last loyal thing it owned, to stand across the quiet road and keep the gray hull from the heart of the Empire. 100 hulls against a gray traveler that could not be touched, a traitor flagship, and a turning empire. It should have been nothing. It was not nothing, because the Stillward did not fire at the gray hull. They had been told the gray hull could not be harmed, so they fired at the only thing on the road that could be. They fired at the cold sovereign. The first salvo of the Stillward was unlike anything the home fleet had thrown, because the Stillward did not use lances. They used the small throne at it, the personal one, the art that did not remove a world but removed a crew, reaching into a hull and striking the names of the living from the page of what was real. It was the worst weapon in the Empire, and the Empire had built only 100 ships that could carry it, and all 100 fired it now, at the bridge of the cold sovereign, at Oru Vanek and Sihul Korin and Veth Maro, and every officer who had survived to this point. And the bridge began to empty. It did not empty in fire. It emptied in absence. An officer at the rim of the bridge, a young gunner named Pel Arden, who had stopped firing on the gray hull an hour before, and had been weeping quietly ever since, simply was not there. And then the place where she had been was not a place anyone remembered. And then no one could recall that the bridge had ever had a station at that rim at all. The Stillward was striking the crew from the record, one name at a time, and a struck name took with it every trace that the name had ever been, so that the bridge did not grieve its dead, because the bridge could not remember it had ever had them. Oruvanik felt the edges of her own crew thinning, and she understood that this was the Empire's true last weapon, worse than the hand, worse than the veil, the quiet personal erasure, and that it would work, because her crew were not facts the way the gray hull was a fact. They were only people, and a person could be unmade by being unremembered. So she gave them the armor, the only armor that worked. "Say your names," she said, on the bridge channel, and her voice was steady, because it had to be. "All of you, out loud. Now, the throne is striking you from the record. It can only strike a name no one is holding, so hold them. Say who you are, and say who is beside you, and do not stop saying it, because a name said aloud by a crew, that means it cannot be unwritten." And the bridge of the Cold Sovereign began to say its own names. "I am Sehil Korin," said the young officer, and his voice shook, and then it did not. "I am second of this ship, and I stopped firing on the gray hull, and I will not be struck out." "I am Veth Morrow," said the old archivist, 240 years old, at the deep station. "I have read the sealed record, and I kept the key to the second door, and I am here, and I am real." And around the rim of the bridge, the surviving officers said their names, each one, and then said the name of the officer beside them, and then said the names of the ones the stillword had already struck, because Oru told them to, because she had realized that the only way to undo a personal erasure was to remember the erased, before the Empire finished unremembering them. They said the name of the young gunner who had wept, Pel Arden. They said it together, the whole bridge, Pel Arden, holding a name that the throne had tried to unmake, and at the rim of the bridge, in the place no one had been able to remember, a young gunner came back into herself, weeping still, alive, real, unstruck, because a crew had held her name in the dark and would not let it go. The stillword struck, and the crew remembered, and the strikes did not take. Oruvanik watched her crew become unkillable in front of her, not because their hulls were strong, but because they had learned, in the last hour of the oldest lie in the sky, the thing the gray hull had always known, that a name held aloud by people who mean it is the heaviest thing in the world, heavier than any edit, heavier than any throne, and that an empire which has remembered how to hold a name can no longer be made to forget a world. "Veth Morrow," she said, "the stillword. Can the second door reach them?" The old archivist's hands were already moving across the deep station. "It can reach anything the core can reach, Commander. The stillword answers to the core. They are listed in the catalog, the same as any hull." He looked up, and there was something terrible and gentle in his old face. "I can strike them out, the way they are striking us. I can reach into the record and unmake 100 hulls, the way the first throne unmade a world." The bridge went quiet. It was the obvious answer. It was the Empire's answer. Erase the thing that frightens you. Strike the page. Make the problem never have existed. "No," Oru said. Veth Morrow looked at her. "We are not going to win this by becoming the first throne," she said. "That is the whole crime, Archivist. That is the entire crime. 11 billion years of it, sitting in that one choice. To strike a thing out because it stood in your way. The Empire did it to a world. The throne is doing it to my crew. I will not do it to the stillword, even now, even to save us, because the moment I do, I am only the next throne, and the gray hull crosses 11 billion more years to undo me." She drew a breath. "There is another way. There is always the other way. We just spent 11 billion years pretending there was not. Open the second door, yes, but do not strike them out. Put them back." "Put them back?" "They were built without a floor," Oru said. "The first throne made them so they could not feel the lie. That was a thing done to them, Archivist. They are victims of the same crime, made into weapons of it. Open the second door and give them back what was taken. Give them the floor. Let them read the record. Let them feel what every other officer in this empire felt when they saw the cut. And then let them choose, the way every other officer chose, because a thing that is allowed to choose almost always chooses the truth, and we have not given the stillword that chance in 11 billion years." Veth Morrow stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, the old archivist did the thing no one had ever thought to do to the stillword, which was not to destroy them, and not to command them, but to repair them, to reach through the second door and give 100 floorless hulls the floor that had been taken from them at their making, and to let them, for the first time in their long, unfeeling existence, read the sealed record and know what they had been built to protect. The stillward stopped firing. 100 black hulls hung in the dark, and for the first time in 11 billion years, they felt the floor under them, and the floor had a hole in it, and they read the record, and they understood, all at once, what they were, and what they had been made to do, and what they had nearly done to a crew that was holding its own names in the dark to stay real. They did not turn against the throne with anger. They had not been built for anger. They turned against the throne with something quieter and far more final, which was the simple refusal of a thing that has been shown the truth and will not go back to the lie. The leader of the stillward, a hull that had no name because the throne had never given it one, spoke for the first time in its existence, on the patient low band, to the commander who had chosen to repair it instead of erase it. We were made without a floor, it said, so that we could not feel the lie we were built to guard. You could have struck us out. You had the door open. You chose to give us the floor instead. No one has ever chosen that. For us, in all the years there have been. A pause, and in the pause was the whole weight of a thing learning, at the very end of an age, that it had been a victim all along. The stillward will not guard the lie. We will guard the road. Bring the gray hull home, Commander. We will stand behind it, and if the throne sends anything else, it will have to come through 100 hulls that have, at last, been given a reason to choose. But the throne had not stopped. The throne could not stop, because the throne was not a person who could be argued out of a lie. The throne was the lie. It was the imperial core itself, the great machine that was the catalog, the deepest function of the ascendancy, and it had no body to feel shame, and no memory of the crime to be moved by, only the single unbreakable instruction that the page must stay blank. As the home fleet went quiet, the throne reached down into its own deepest function, the art that removed worlds, the throne edit itself, and it aimed the whole of that ancient power not at the gray hull this time, because the gray hull could not be moved. It aimed it at the catalog. Commander, Vethmaro said, and his old voice had gone to a thread. The throne is going to do the worst thing. It is going to delete the entry it has spent 11 billion years protecting. If it cannot keep Earth's page blank by holding the ship off, it will make the blank page permanent. It will reach into the catalog and burn the function that could ever put a world back. It will close the second door forever. It is going to make the erasure unfixable, so that even if the gray hull reaches the core, there will be no page left to write Earth onto, and the world will be lost, not for 11 billion years, but for all the years there are. Oru Vanek looked at the core, growing on the wall, and she understood that the race had changed. It was no longer a race to reach the throne. It was a race against the throne's own last act of cowardice. If the gray hull reached the core before the throne burned the door, Earth could be written back. If the throne reached the door first, Earth would be gone for good, and the Empire would die with the burned door still in its hand, having destroyed the one thing it could never make again, rather than admit it had ever been lost. How long? Oru said. Minutes, Vethmaro said. Perhaps less. The throne is fast when it is afraid, and it has never been this afraid. Oru looked at the gray traveler, patient and gray, and unkillable, and she made her last command decision as a fleet commander of the Veil Ascendancy. Then we stop asking the Empire to get out of the way, she said. And we go through, full power, both ships, straight to the core. We do not slow for the throne's defenses. We do not slow for anything. The gray hull cannot be stopped, and the cold sovereign will ride in its shadow, and we will reach the door before the throne can burn it. Or we will not, but we will not stop. She put her hand flat on the rail of her dying ship. Signal the gray hull. Tell it to run. Tell it the door is at the heart of the core, and the throne is about to burn it, and the only thing in the sky that can reach it first is a truth that has waited 11 billion years to come home. Tell it to stop being patient. She almost smiled. Tell it we will be right behind it. The gray hull received the signal, and for the first time in 2 days, the gray traveler changed its speed. It accelerated. 11 million tons of a murdered world surviving truth that had crossed the whole age of the dark at a single steady patient pace, finally, with the door to its own home in sight, and a coward's hand reaching to burn it, opened up and ran, and the cold sovereign burned every engine it had left to stay in its wake, and together, the gray hull and the traitor flagship drove straight into the throat of the Veil Ascendancy, racing the throne for the last door in the sky. The core did not let them reach it easily. Between the quiet road and the heart of the Empire stood the last thing the Veil Ascendancy had built to protect its lie, and it was not a fleet, and it was not the Hand, and it was older than both. The Empire called it the Veil. It was a sphere of folded dark wrapped around the Imperial core, a layer of the world where the catalog's rule was absolute, where nothing existed unless the core said it existed, and the Empire had hung it there 11 billion years before, on the same day it erased Earth, because the first throne had understood that the safest place to keep a lie was inside a region where only the liar got to say what was real. The gray hull reached the Veil and began to slow. For the first time in 3 days, the gray traveler met something it could not simply walk through. The Veil did not fire on it. The Veil did something worse. It tried to make the gray hull agree that it was not there. Inside the folded dark, the core's word was law, and the core's word was that there was no ship, no Earth, no people, no truth. Only the Empire and its catalog, and its blank and perfect page. The gray hull pushed into the Veil, and the Veil closed around it like a fist made of unreality, and on the wall of the cold sovereign, the gray contact began, for the first time, to thin. "It is failing," Cell said, and his voice was raw with disbelief, because in 3 days he had come to believe the gray hull could not fail. "Commander, the Veil is editing it. Inside the fold, the core's word is the only word. It is making the ship agree it was never real. It is going to do to the gray hull what it did to the world." Oruvanik watched the gray contact thin, and she understood that the Empire had built one weapon that could touch the truth after all, and it had built it 11 billion years before, for exactly this day, because the first throne had known the ship was outside the edit and had hung the Veil around the core, so that if the ship ever came home, there would be one place in all the sky where even a fact could be told it did not exist. But the first throne had made one mistake, and it was the mistake of every liar, which is that he had thought the truth was only carried in the gray hull. "It is not alone in there," Oru said. She drove the cold sovereign into the Veil behind the gray hull. The folded dark closed around her flagship, and the core's word reached for it, and the cold sovereign began to thin, exactly as it had at the throne edit, the bridge going soft, the wall going pale, Sail flickering at the edge of his own name. But Oruvanik had learned the armor that worked, and she used it now, and she used it louder than she ever had. "There was a world called Earth," she said, "into every band, across the whole of the folded dark, where the core's word was supposed to be the only word. It was real. The Empire erased it. The gray ship is its child. We are bringing it home. I am Fleet Commander Oruvanik, and I have read the sealed record, and I know the world was real, and I will not agree that it was not, and you cannot make me, because I am a fact now, and a fact does not thin inside a lie." And across the folded dark, the truth answered her. It came from everywhere. From the third ring, 40,000 hulls, Admiral Tessin Hale and every officer who had read the record, saying it with her. There was a world called Earth, on every band, into the Veil, from the watch stations that had gone deaf, to the throne, from the home fleet that had stopped firing, from 200,000 crews who had heard her speak the truth on the open band, and could not unhear it, all of them saying it now, the same words, the same fact, pouring it into the folded dark where the core's word was supposed to be the only word, until the core's word was not the only word, until the Veil was full of a truth said by half an empire, and a region of the world where only the liar got to say what was real had more truth in it than lie. The Veil broke. It did not break with a sound. It broke the way a held breath breaks, all at once, releasing, and the folded dark came apart, and the gray hull came back into itself, solid and whole and gray, Earth plain on its prow, and behind it the cold sovereign came back into itself, and behind that the truth went on rolling, said by every hull that had chosen it, until the last weapon the Empire had ever built to protect its lie, unfolded into clean dark, and was gone. Veth Maro, at the deep station, was laughing, the strange thin laugh of the very old who have lived to see the impossible. "The Veil was the masterwork," he said. the first throne's masterwork. A place where only the liar's word was real. And it broke, Commander. Do you understand why it broke? Not because the gray hull was strong, because the lie was outnumbered. The first throne built a fortress for one liar against one fact, and he never once imagined that the empire itself might one day take the fact's side. He could not imagine it. It was the one thing his whole architecture was built to make impossible, and we did it anyway. The old archivist wiped his eyes. The gray hull did not break the veil, Commander. We did. The empire broke its own last lie, by reading the record and choosing the truth. And there will never be a veil again, because you cannot rebuild a fortress for a liar once the empire has remembered that it would rather be honest. The gray hull spoke, on the patient low band, and it had heard the whole empire say the truth into the folded dark, and it did not forget. It said, "You came in after us, into the place that tried to unmake you. You did not have to. This was not your world we were looking for. It was not your home that was taken, and still you came in, and said the true thing, where the true thing could kill you. We will not forget this. When our world is back in the sky, and it will be, we will remember that at the last door, an empire that had erased us chose to stand in the fire beside us, rather than keep the page blank." And the gray hull and the cold sovereign, and the 40,000 hulls of the third ring, and the deaf watch stations, and the home fleet that had stopped firing, all turned together, as one, toward the heart of the empire, where the last blank page in all the sky lay open at the core, waiting for a truth that had crossed 11 billion years of dark to finally come home and write itself back into the world. The imperial core was a single vast sphere of pale machinery hung in the dark between 4 dead suns, and it was the oldest made thing in the empire, and the gray hull and the burning flagship fell toward it, like 2 stones dropped down a well. The core's defenses came alive. Not lances now. The core did not bother with lances. It reached out with the throne edit, the world-removing art, the same power that had unlisted Earth, and it tried, in its last desperation, to unlist the gray hull and the cold sovereign both, to strike them from the catalog the way it had struck a world 11 billion years before. The gray hull did not even slow. The edit slid off it, as it always had, finding nothing thin enough to grip. But the cold sovereign was imperial metal, and when the throne edit reached for it, Oru Vanek felt her own ship begin to thin. It was the strangest and most terrible thing she had ever felt. The edges of the bridge went soft. The wall went pale. The sail Corin, beside her, flickered, like a name being slowly rubbed from a page, and she understood that the core had decided to do to her flagship exactly what the first throne had done to a world, to make the cold sovereign never have existed, so that there would be no traitor commander, no spoken truth, no record of the day the Empire's lie was said aloud. "It is editing us out," Seal said, and his voice came from very far away. "Commander, we are going." Oru Vanek looked at the gray hull, untouched beside her, and she understood the last lesson, the deepest one, the one the first throne had never learned, because the first throne had never loved anything enough to test it. The gray hull could not be edited out because it carried the truth of a whole people, and the truth was too heavy to move. But truth was not only carried in a hull, it could be carried in a witness. It could be carried in a thing said aloud where 200,000 crews had heard it. It could be carried in a commander who had read the sealed record and known it for true and chosen it over 91 years of everything she had been. "It cannot edit us out," Oru said, and she said it the way the gray hull spoke, without heat, with the full weight of a thing that knew itself to be real. "It is trying, but it cannot. Because we are not a lie anymore, officer. We were a lie 3 days ago. We were the keepers of a blank page. But we read the record, and we spoke the truth, and the whole fleet heard it. And now we are a fact, the same as the gray hull, and the edit slides off a fact the way it slides off that ship. Hold on to the truth, say it out loud. It is the only armor that works against this weapon, and it is the strongest armor there is." And Sel Corin, young, bleeding, half-edited from the page, said the truth out loud. "There was a world called Earth," he said. "The Empire erased it. The gray ship is its child. We are bringing it home." And the thinning stopped. The cold sovereign came back into itself, solid, real, burning but whole, because a crew that holds the truth aloud cannot be unlisted by a machine built to make lies stick. The throne edit reached for them and found a fact, and the fact would not move, and the core, which had never in 11 billion years met a thing inside its own borders that it could not edit, met two of them at once, and could do nothing. The gray hull reached the core's skin. It did not blast through. It did not have to. The core opened for it. Veth Maro, at the deep station of the cold sovereign, had reached across into the imperial machine and thrown open the oldest door, the one the first throne had sealed, the second door of the room, the one that put things back instead of taking them away. He had been reading the sealed record his whole life without knowing why. Now he knew why. He had been keeping the key. "The door is open, Commander," he said, and the old archivist was weeping, openly, 240 years old, and weeping like the young. "The function is alive. The page is here. The page for Earth, blank for 11 billion years, is open and waiting, and it can be written. But it must be written by something that knows the world is real, and the only thing in all the sky that knows the world is real, that truly knows it, in its bones, in its metal, is the ship that came home," Oru said. The gray hull entered the core. It moved through the pale machinery to the heart of the catalog, to the open page, and the whole empire held its breath. Every surviving hull of the home fleet, every officer who had stopped firing, the wounded cold sovereign, the weeping archivist, the broken throne, all of them watching one gray traveler arrive at the blank page that was its murdered home. And the gray hull wrote. It did not write with weapons. It wrote with the only thing it had ever carried, the truth of its people, 11 billion years of it, held unbroken in a hull that had crossed the whole age of the dark to come home. It poured that truth onto the open page, and the page, which had been blank since before the core's own suns were lit, drank it down, and across the whole catalog of the Veil Ascendancy, a single entry began, slowly, to fill. A small blue world, third from a yellow star, far down a quiet arm, a young people who built fast and asked politely. The fragments along the torn edge found their sentences again. The cut healed. The cut of the cut healed. And then, beyond the fragments, beyond anything the Empire had ever erased, the gray hull wrote the part of the entry that the First Throne had never seen, because the First Throne had erased the world before the world had finished becoming itself. It wrote what Earth had grown into. In the 11 billion years that the gray hull had spent crossing the dark, looking for a home it could not find, it had not been empty. It had not been a tomb. It had been alive. The people of Earth had not all been on the world when the edit closed. There had been the one ship, finished and crewed, and on its maiden run, outside the edge of its own star. And a ship is a seed. The people of Earth had lived on in the gray hull, generation after generation, 11 billion years of them, born and grown old and gone, in a single ship crossing the dark, holding the memory of a blue world third from a yellow star, building, learning, becoming, never once forgetting the name of the home they were looking for. They had become, in 11 billion years of patience, the single oldest and most enduring people in all the sky, and they had carried their whole becoming in their hull, and now they poured it onto the page, and the page of Earth filled not with a small young world the Empire had been right to fear, but with the deepest and longest and most patient people the catalog had ever held. And the world came back into the sky. It happened all at once, the way the edit had happened all at once, 11 billion years before, but in the other direction, the second door instead of the first. Far down a quiet arm, around a yellow star, a small blue world that had not existed for an age, folded back into the place where it had always belonged, exactly as it had been on the day before it was taken, oceans and clouds and green, and the lanes around it that had been empty since before the Empire was born, suddenly had a destination again, and the catalog of the Veil Ascendancy, for the first time in 11 billion years, was complete. The throne died. It did not die in fire. It died the way a lie dies when the truth it was built on top of finally arrives. The Imperial Core, which was the catalog, which was the lie, which had spent 11 billion years keeping one page blank, could not survive the page being filled, because the whole of it had been organized around the absence, and when the absence ended, the organization had nothing left to hold. The pale machinery went quiet, the throne edit went dark. The function that removed worlds, the worst art the Empire had ever made, shut itself off, and would never wake again, because the second door had been opened, and the first door could not bear to be the only one. The Veil Ascendancy did not fall. That was the thing Oru Vanek had not expected. She had thought, when she turned her guns outward against her own home, that she was ending the Empire. But the Empire did not end. The Empire only stopped being a lie. The catalog survived, the lanes survived. The home fleet survived, 200,000 crews who had stopped firing, and would carry to the end of their lives the memory of the day they chose a fact over an order. What died was only the part of the Empire that had been built on an erasure, and that part, it turned out, was not the Empire. It was only the wound at the bottom of it, and when the wound healed, the rest of the Empire was still there, lighter, cleaner, complete for the first time. The gray hull finished writing. The entry for Earth was whole. And the gray traveler turned, slowly, in the heart of the core that had tried to kill it, and it spoke one last time on the patient low band, to the wounded flagship and the weeping archivist, and the commander who had read far enough back to find the truth, and brave enough to say it aloud. It said, "Thank you. Our world is home. We are going to it now. We have been looking for a very long time." Then it added one more line, and the line was for Oru Vanek, by name, because the gray hull had heard her speak the truth into 200,000 hulls and had not forgotten. It said, "You did not do this thing, but you undid it. The Empire will remember you as the one who put a world back into the sky. We will remember you as the first of yours who ever came to meet us as a friend. Both are true. The second is heavier." And the gray hull, Earth plane on its prow, 11 million tons of the oldest and most patient people in all the dark, left the heart of the Empire and turned down the long quiet road toward a small blue world that was, at last, there to receive it. It went home. Oru Vanek stood on the bridge of the burning cold sovereign and watched it go, and beside her Sehel Korin stood, alive, whole, no longer half a name on a page, and behind them, old Veth Maro sat at the deep station with the open record of Earth glowing in front of him, the entry he had kept the key to for 240 years without knowing why. "The throne will send for us," Sehel said quietly. "There is no throne to send anymore," Oru said. "But there will be a new one. There always is. And the new one will have to decide what to do with the commander who turned her guns on her own empire. What will you tell them?" Oru Vanek looked at the dwindling gray hull, and at the small blue world that had come back into the sky, and she found that she was not afraid of any throne, old or new, ever again. "I will tell them the truth," she said. "It is the only weapon I have left that works, and it turns out to be the only one that ever did. I will tell them that an empire is not a catalog. It is a promise to see things as they are. We broke that promise 11 billion years ago, and we kept breaking it. Every single day we let the page stay blank, and I am the commander who stopped." She drew a slow breath, and for the first time in 91 years, it did not taste of the catalog. It tasted of clean dark and a world come home. "And if the new throne does not like it, they can strike me from the record, but they will find that I cannot be struck out anymore. None of us can. We held the truth aloud where the whole fleet could hear it. We are facts now, and the Empire just learned, the hard way, what happens when it tries to edit out a fact." The cold sovereign turned for home, burning along 3 decks but whole, 200,000 hulls of the home fleet, falling in around it not as captors, but as an escort, because a fleet that has chosen a truth together does not easily let go of the ship that gave it the choice. Far down the quiet arm, the gray hull settled into orbit around a small blue world, third from a yellow star, and after 11 billion years of crossing the dark, the oldest people in the sky came home to oceans and clouds and green, and the catalogue of the Veil Ascendancy, complete at last, recorded the moment of their return in clean plain script that no throne would ever again be permitted to cut. And in the deep station of a flagship that had turned traitor to save a world, an archivist 240 years old read the new entry over and over, the entry for Earth, whole and bright and unerasable, and he understood why he had been kept alive so long past his span, not to remember the Empire's lie, to witness the day it was undone. The first throne had written, in his private hand, 11 billion years before. The day the truth arrives is the day the catalog ends. He had been wrong about the last part. The catalog did not end. Only the lie at the bottom of it ended. The catalog went on, lighter and cleaner and complete. And at the bottom of it now, where the blank page had been, there was a small blue world, and the oldest people in the sky, and the name of the commander who had put them back. And the gray hull never left Earth again. It had no need. It had spent the whole age of the dark looking, and it had found the one thing it was looking for, and the empire that had tried to keep it lost had learned, in a single afternoon, the lesson the first throne had been too proud to teach. That you cannot panic a fact into being a lie, that a dreadnought, built by a people who were real, cannot be unmade by an empire's pretending, and that the heaviest thing in all the sky, heavier than any fleet, heavier than any throne, is a truth that has decided to come home. Oruvanik flew the cold sovereign back into the heart of the empire she had saved by betraying, and she was not afraid, and she never would be again. And somewhere far down a quiet arm, a small blue world turned in the light of its yellow star, exactly where it had always belonged, with a gray hull in orbit that had crossed 11 billion years to put it back into the sky. The Galactic Empire had panicked. It had been right to. That could not be a ship the catalog had missed. That could not be a ship the catalog had missed. That could not be a ship the catalog had missed. That could not be a people the Empire swore had never existed. But it was. And in the end, the Empire learned the only lesson it had ever needed, and had spent its whole history refusing to hear, which is that the universe does not run on the catalog. It runs on what is true. And the truth, when it finally comes home, does not arrive angry. It arrives patient. It arrives gray. It arrives with a plain square name on its prow, and a single gentle question, and it waits, and it cannot be moved, and it cannot be killed, and it cannot be edited out of the sky, and it does not stop, ever, for 11 billion years if that is what it takes, until the lie that was told about it gets out of the way and lets it come home.